Worrying is like praying for everything that you don't want. And you can trust me when I say this because back in the day, I was preaching to my own demise. I thought that I was protecting myself by creating these scenarios in my head, that somehow I was preparing myself for what could possibly happen. And really, the truth is, I was kind of creating a cage around myself and I was getting locked inside of my own head. And if you have ever been caught up in your own mind, then you know how exhausting it can be. And not only that, it can be dangerous as well. Because here's the truth. Your mind does not know the difference between made up tragedy and the real thing. So you're creating stress that does not exist. And studies show that 85 to 90% of things that are worried about never happen. Now, the things that I worried about were typically due to personal interactions. My insecurities really raised their ugly head during interactions. So I would fuss about things that I said, about things that others said, about actions, reactions. What did they mean by that? All of these things would show up in the middle of the night, and I would find myself fussing about them for hours. And then there are like situational things that we worry about. I personally am not much of a situational worrier, but I met one today. As we were having a discussion, she admitted to me that she was a bit of a worrier and that she probably has missed out on a few opportunities throughout her life because of her tendency to what if. There's also health-related worrying. This is commonly referred to as health anxiety. You're thinking about all of the things that could possibly be wrong with you. There is performance or competence worrying. What if I'm not good enough? I can't meet expectations. There's also a relationship worrying, which dives a little bit deeper than the interaction worrying that I referred to. These are fears about the stability of a relationship, not one particular interaction. So just the overall relationship itself, there are concerns and worrying about that. There is existential worry, worrying about what's happening to our planet, the big picture. What if the economy collapses? There's still what ifs, but they're very big and very broad what ifs. And then there is meta worry, and this is worrying about worrying. And this can tie back to other things. What if my worrying makes him stop loving me? What if my worrying causes a heart attack? What if my worrying, so you're worrying about worrying that's going to cause another worry. There are ways that we can curb our tendency to worry and really rein it in, if you will, so it can feed more positive momentum and we're not stuck wasting our time and energy. And really, it can have a negative effect on our personal relationships. We can miss out on opportunities just because we're stuck in our own minds. So here's a few things that you can do to break you free of a bit of worrying. For me, in my interaction situation, what I've learned to do is just to get clarification. If someone has said something to me and I'm worrying about what they meant by that, then I'll just ask them, you said X, I heard this. Because that's where we start telling ourselves stories, right? So they say one thing, but we take something else in. And in this day and age where we're doing so much digital conversations, it's really easy to misconstrue what someone has said. So an easy way to remedy that is to just get clarification. Now, don't reply with a, what did you mean by that? Because then that's just going to create this horrible circle, right? The best thing to do is to have a one-on-one or at least a phone conversation. So that's conversational or interactions. But what about situational? Let's say we're planning a trip. And so we can start worrying about all of the things that could go wrong. All of my clothes won't fit in my luggage. What if I need to check a bag, my carry-on's not enough? What if my shoes aren't sufficient for all of the walking we're going to do? What if I don't make it to the plane on time? What if the plane crashes? What if? There are a million what ifs that we can create in our head, but the truth is, what if everything went right? And I did hear this really interesting exercise from someone the other day, and he does a what if scenario before he gets out of bed in the morning. But his what if scenario is, what if I get my entire to-do list done today? What if that presentation I have to give is excellent? What if my kids do everything I ask them to do today? What if? So he creates this incredible positive what if scenario. So that's an option for you. The other thing that you can do, some of the proven ways to kind of help reduce or divert worrying, you can set a worry appointment. So if you find yourself worrying about something, you can tell yourself, nope, my time to worry is between 5 and 6 o'clock. And I will put this on my list of things to worry about at that time. And then you can acknowledge it, but then give yourself an appointment to address that later. And if you want to go ahead and worry between 5 and 6, you can take all of the scenarios that you want and worry about them at that time. And often what happens is by the time that comes around and you look at your list of things to worry about, you've acknowledged that it's not that much that I need to be concerned about. Or you can go ahead and think, okay, that is something that I need to address, but here's some practical ways that I can go about doing it. Time does that for us. Another proven way to kind of deter worrying is to ask yourself, is this real or is it a rehearsal? And that way you can kind of figure out in your own head, is this stinking thinking? Am I making things up? Are these possibilities that I'm creating in my head? Or are these real scenarios that I need to worry about? Example, what if we have a flat tire on our way to the airport? Well, we could have a flat tire because I did notice that the wear on the tires is pretty significant. And I really should be thinking about new tires. That's something that you can do something about, right? So in this case, you would say, yes, we could have a flat tire on our way to the airport, but to prevent that, I'm going to go have the tires checked. And if we need new ones, we'll go ahead and have those installed. Done. You don't have to worry about it anymore. And if you're one that likes things like yoga and breath work, use that to your best advantage. Because the truth is, if you can get some breath work going, and they say that the box breath can really help reframe your way of thinking. So a box breath is 4 in, hold it for 4, exhale for 4, and then hold the exhale for 4. So if you do box breathing for a few rounds, that will help kind of reset your mind, and more logical thinking will be able to take over. And a little movement is also beneficial because that'll help you get out of your brain. Turn on some music, dance around, wave your hand, and that will help kind of shake things out, if you will. If you find yourself in some of the more significant worrying categories, like the existential worrying or the meta worrying, which is kind of worry on worry, there's a couple ways that you can address these. So existentially, you really need to think about, what can I do about the situation that I'm concerned with? And there are small things that we can do to resolve situations, right? So if you are concerned about pollution, then what you can do is, in your world, you can make changes to help the pollution situation. But often we have to acknowledge that there are things that are outside of our control. And the only thing that we have control over is our reaction to them. So if your reaction is worrying, then you're going to have to start labeling that for yourself. So then you can start turning that worrying into some form of action. So then you feel like you're actually doing something about whatever the cause is that you're concerned about. Hope that helps. And then meta worrying. When we're worrying about worrying, sometimes you just have to remind yourself that your brain is doing all of the things to try to protect you from all the bad things that can possibly happen. It's scanning for threats, but then you are the one that needs to decide if these threats are logical and probable. So sometimes what you're going to have to do, instead of fighting it, you just have to acknowledge it and you have to name it. So you'll say, I understand that I'm worrying about worrying in this moment. And by naming it, acknowledging it, you can start to separate yourself a little bit. And if you can stop and do some of the box breathing that I talked about earlier, after you recognize that you're worrying about worrying, do some box breathing. It can help you kind of reframe that. But just naming it and acknowledging that this is like a second layer worry, then it can help remove that for you. And one last one, which is really kind of my favorite, and I try to do this on a regular basis, even if I am not stinking thinking, and that is to do a bit of gratitude. If we interrupt our negative thinking with gratitude, it really is beneficial for our overall outlook. So if you start worrying, usually situational worrying, this is great for, because if you are worrying about having a flat tire on the way to the airport, then you can say, but I am grateful for the vehicle that I have and those new tires I just put on, right? So once you start giving yourself gratitude for the things that you do have, then it really kind of helps reset your mind and gives you a realistic outlook on what you are worrying about. So the next time you find yourself worrying, just remind yourself that when you're doing that, you really are praying for all of the things that you don't want. So what if this week you tried preaching the possibilities to yourself instead? The next time your mind starts to write a horror story for you, I want you to flip that script and I want you to turn it into a miracle instead. I am Resourceful Raini, and here is to fresh starts and fearless moves. I'll see you next time.